What is going on, everybody? Welcome. This is a video that has been a long time in the making. Many of you are aware I have been laboring away at a roster overhaul. So much information that is going to be packed into this video. So if you are familiar with this channel, this is going to be a lot of scattered information that you've gotten before, really just jam-packed into one video. I am going to go as deep into explaining all of the micro details that go into my roster, Real 2019, and this is more directed towards the people that are just finding this roster. Maybe you want the updated transactions, you want to play with Odell on the Browns, and you saw my roster as the #1 out there, and you saw these ratings changed, and you're like, what the hell is this all about? Well, this is going to be considered my sales pitch for why you should use this roster, why it is a better, more immersive, more realistic, and just fun experience compared to EA's roster that, in my opinion, has many, many flaws. So we're going to go through all of that stuff in detail here. So we're going to get to kind of the ratings changes and why I do a lot of these things, but I do want to first answer a lot of frequently asked questions and address sort of some announcements here so that when I get all these questions on Twitter, I can just direct you to this video, and in the first couple minutes here, hopefully I can answer every question. So as of this date, March 23rd, we are all up to date on transactions, trades, free agency. There are a few guys still on teams that are on the market. That is just because, a lot of these guys do end up getting re-signed, and that's just a lot of extra work to put them in the free agent pool and then bring them back. So it's not completely perfect, and there is still a lot of stuff to do here, right? We're going to continue to update this thing every day. When the rookies come out, I will add them to the roster. And then I also have my draft classes, as many of you know. I've currently got 5 draft classes out there that are built to play nice with this overhaul. I do need to update all of those in the coming weeks, and then I will also have an update with some new information on the 2019 draft class as well. So still a lot of work ahead, but I will say the hardest part, overhauling over 2,700 players on this thing, that is all done. So it's all downhill from here. So some frequently asked questions from the people that have gotten their hands on this roster already. So Le'Veon Bell has a different face. Yes, it's not perfect. There are just a lot of crappy things I have to do because EA is so damn limited in the customization for rosters. I mean, seriously, I can't edit contracts. I can't edit development traits. I can't change injuries. It's so many things that I have just asked time and time again and have gotten nothing back from EA. I wish it were different, but Le'Veon Bell was listed as an injured player, which meant I couldn't move him off the Steelers. So I had to find a similar player, recreate Le'Veon Bell in a way. So he's the only player like this. Him and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, who came out of retirement. They're going to look a little different, but they're going to play the same. So then the other question is draft picks. The Giants will not have that first round pick, for example. It will be updated as of the last update, though. So I believe the Bears will have, or the Raiders will have that Bears pick, although I don't think they got the Amari Cooper pick in there. Somehow it took them 3 months, or it's 3 months removed from that, and they still didn't have that in there. But it's as up to date as EA themselves have it. But I cannot trade draft picks. That's just one of those limited things. So, basically the Browns get Odell for free. And then as far as contracts are concerned, I keep mentioning how limited I am. So I try to get them as close as possible with what I'm allowed to do. So, they sign these players while I'm editing this roster based on overall. So if a 74 overall guard, or say, maybe a little higher, say Trent Brown at 81 overall in my roster, signs this massive deal. Well, I can't match that. The most I can do in-game is a 3-year deal, and as much as they'll allow it. So I will boost him up to a 99 overall, sign him on the Raiders, and then I will, edit him back to an 81. And I'm not going to, take shots at anyone else that does this roster or does do these transactions, but I would be a little surprised if someone else was taking the time to do all of this to get it to be more, accurate for your franchise, to impact the salary cap as accurately as possible. And this specifically applies to the lower level guys who are signing for 1-year deals. say like a Jake Ryan, for example, a 73 overall linebacker, or even if you were using EA's roster, he's probably like an 80. Well, if you just release him from the Packers and he was signed by the Jaguars, he's going to sign a 3-year deal. He's going to have a ton of guaranteed money down the road. Well, what I do for all of these guys getting 1-year deals, I change them to punter, so their overall dips below 60 overall. I sign them to their new team. I change them back to their position. I change their number, and they're there on the 1-year deal. So I am serious, guys. So much time goes into just editing players' overalls and positions just so they can get accurate contracts. That is a massive part about the transactions that I don't know if other people are putting that sort of attention to detail in there. So I just wanted to let you guys know that that is there. And then the other thing, this is something I've done in the past, and people I'll get it like, oh, you have so-and-so at the wrong position. Well, this game, when it comes to edge players, is really dumb. Obviously, in real life, say a team like the Bucks is now switching from a 4-3 scheme to a 3-4 scheme. Well, if you go into franchise mode and you're not playing as the Bucks, they're going to be playing a 4-3 team. So, for example, they signed Shaquille Barrett. He will be an outside linebacker next year in the 3-4 scheme for Todd Bowles. Well, in Madden, he would then be played as an off-ball linebacker because this game can't recognize who's an edge guy and who's an off-ball linebacker. So I'm going to put him at defensive end so he is at least playing at his correct position. And if you want to play as the Bucks and switch to a 3-4 scheme, obviously you are fully empowered to switch him to outside linebacker then. But this is just so that the game plays nicely with what we have to work with. And then my last note here, this roster is Xbox only. I know I have done PS4 stuff in the past or gotten some help from the community on getting that out there. Well, the fact of the matter is this overhaul took me 120 hours in the last 3 weeks or so alone. That's not including the work on transactions, what I will be doing on the draft classes, creating rookies when the draft happens. So, needless to say, I'm sorry, guys. I wish it were different. I do not have the time or energy to even think about duplicating this process on PlayStation 4. Honestly, just the thought of it hurts my mind because I know I do not have the capability to do that. I wish it were different, but for something that is a free service that takes this much time, I just am not capable of doing it. So I hope you understand that. I do not feel great about it because it's something I've promised in the past, but it really just drained me, and I wish it were different, but this is going to be Xbox only for the foreseeable future. Now, that said, it's not hopeless to get this thing on PS4 or PC if you are a PC guy or girl. There's two ways this could magically happen. If you all, tagged EA, tagged the employees on Twitter, and just said, we need cross-compatible rosters. If everyone that watched this video did that, that's going to be probably over 3,000 people. I don't know exactly how well this video is going to do, but I have a feeling they might think about that if they had 3,000 people demand that thing. Otherwise, I do have a Discord server. These guys have been great helping to get this thing on PS4 in the past. So if a community effort could get this thing done, I'd be more than happy to share the finished product, but I just do not have the capabilities to assist in that right now. So I will post the link to that Discord in the description below. The last thing I will say before I talk about the ratings at the end here, guys, if you can't tell, this is a free service that I have now put a lot of time and energy into. As your parents always teach you, tip your waiter. I'm not going to sound desperate. I'm only going to say this once. But if you do want to support this work, if you see this roster as a type of DLC and you want to show your support, help me out, help me pay the bills a little bit, you can donate at paypal.me/tfgfootball or become a patron. You'll get exclusive content, draft content, access to my Discord server, a lot of stuff like that. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I do really appreciate it though, guys, if you want to show your support. So let's talk about the ratings overhaul here. Also, by the way, the name of the roster is Real 2019. It's not that hard to find. It's the #1 downloaded roster there on Xbox. Gamertag currently Chubby Dubs. We're going to change that next year. That's going back to my high school days there. So on a macro scale, these ratings are completely overhauled, and I have more videos that talk about why I do this. I'll link one of those in the description as well, but I will touch on it real quick. Essentially, the ratings in EA's roster, in my opinion, are far, far too high. There is not a gap between your kind of solid starter and your superstar. So like if you have Kenny Stills, for example, is kind of my go-to guys, an 84, or even like Danny Amendola, an 85 overall. And then you look at like AJ Green, Keenan Allen as an 89 or a 90. Well, we all know in reality, the value and just performance of these players, the gap is massive. But that's not reflected by EA's roster. And I guess they do this because they want every team to be fun. They don't want to insult the players. They want the fans to be happy with their players. There's a lot of things going on. The roster they make is not for the realistic franchise experience. It's a global roster for all types of players. So this roster is directed towards people that want a realistic franchise experience. So the biggest thing here is you're going to segment these players, and it's going to reflect the way that the NFL looks at players. I mean, you really have the elite guys that get paid a ton of money. You got kind of a middle class of guys that you know that can be starters and be reliable, but they're going to be kind of more system players. Whereas the superstars you can plug in and they can do everything. And then you have your replacement level guys who, you know, they could start 3 or 4 games, they can fill a role, but they're not going to earn big contracts like those players will with EA's roster, who are usually like high 70s, low 80s, these replacement level starter types like Travis Benjamin, or to use a quarterback like Blake Bortles. But essentially, you are going to truly feel it when you have a star player. Not just in terms of how much you got to pay the guy compared to the other players on your team, but also just playing with that player. He will actually feel like a superstar, and if he gets hurt or you have to let him go in free agency, well, you aren't going to be able to just go into the available free agents and sign an 80 overall player that's going to play really, really well, which is, building a team in real life is not nearly as easy as EA makes it in franchise mode. So that is the main focus of why I overhaul these ratings. A little bit about myself and my scouting background. I've been doing this roster for 3 years now. It's been the #1 roster 3 years in a row. I work for Pro Football Focus, so this roster has a heavy influence of PFF grades. It is essentially a combination of that, my understanding of the PFF premium stats, along with my own watching film. Every week I go back and watch every single game on NFL Game Pass after, so there's that, and that is basically where I get the ratings from. So again, I have other videos that really dive into a little more about what the ratings are, so I will post that in the description below. But what I really want to talk about in this video is the more micro changes that I make that I haven't really spent a lot of time detailing, and I really want to hit in on these and let you guys in on all of the stuff I'm doing here. So we're going to do a macro explanation of the smaller things that I'm doing, and then we'll go through position by position and some differences you can expect by position. So on a more macro scale, there's really 4 big things here. #1 is the strength and impact blocking overhaul. For many of you, some of you know, impact blocking for defenders is a rating that changes how often you're going to get put on your butt. And EA's roster is all over the place. With linebackers specifically, this is a big issue. You can't take a guy like Deion Buchanan and stick him right in the box as a middle linebacker and thump between the trenches. You want him outside the tackles where he can use that speed and pursuit. But in Madden, there's really not a big difference, especially when I almost see no correlation as I go through this between height and weight and actual impact block rating. It's almost like they just left it alone. And I actually have to change every single linebacker and edge rusher in the game to a offensive lineman just so I can edit this trait. So that's a whole process. But strength and impact blocking are now correlated to height and weight, and strength is, of course, applies to every position in the game. But this is just something that's never made any sense to me. Strength as it functions in this game should at least be the one thing that Madden looks at as, you know, a body profile. The first thing that every scout does is body profile as a player, but it just doesn't matter in EA's roster. You have a guy like Byron Maxwell who's 200 pounds with 79 strength, which is higher than a good chunk of offensive and defensive linemen that are over 100 pounds heavier. And that's one example of hundreds and hundreds. So now on a global scale, for every player, whether it's a 60 overall or a 99 overall, strength is essentially going to hover around a baseline for your height and weight. Now, there's going to be freaks like Khalil Mack, Jalen Ramsey, who are going to, you know, be kind of unicorns and have a higher strength based on their height and weight profile, but it's not going to be, you know, exponential. And you're still not going to have Khalil Mack being stronger than like some of the best nose tackles in the game. He's going to be proportionally strong to his position and his body class, but not to every player in the game, because I think Khalil Mack has like 97, 98 strength or something. And then just like in general, a lot of just micro detail here. I keep using that word, but I don't really know how else to explain it. So like, take a guy, Albert Havili, something called an Albert Havili. You probably don't even know who he is. He's a 64 overall free agent in EA's roster. He's a 6'2", 255-pound edge rusher. He has 90 strength, which is proportionally one of the strongest players in the game. That is more than essentially anyone in the game. And at 6'2", 255, this is an edge rusher. But then you look into his player card and he has 65 power moves. Like, it just does not add up. A lot of just little things, and like having these players play authentic to what that type of body type should be. And I get like, yeah, he shouldn't be like an elite power rusher. He's just not a very good player. But if he is this just absolutely disproportionately strong dude and has 90 strength, which is functional in-game strength, how is it possible that if he attempted a bull rush, he's going to get stuffed by everyone in the game every single time? So, I mean, that's a 64 overall free agent we're talking about. Below that up, 2,700 players in this game, looking at them individually and making sure they play authentically. So that is the type of detail and love that that I'm talking about here with this roster. And I really do, you know, pay attention to every single player that I edit. And that, I hope, is just a strong example of that. So that's something I've been doing, but I just wanted to repeat that. And then this time around, this is the big one. This is the big kicker that I kind of plugged earlier when I started in on this thing. It is well known that jumping for linebackers and just usering ability for linebackers, throwing arcs, is absolutely broken and frankly unplayable. So this is the big seller for this roster, and it is that jumping for linebackers, safety, cornerback has been absolutely nerfed. So now jumping for linebackers is maxed at 70 and then 75 for defensive backs. So I don't care if you're Roquan Smith. I don't even know what Roquan's vertical was. You know, I don't care if you had a 44-inch vertical at the linebacker position. You will have 70 jumping, and obviously if you couldn't jump to begin with, you're going to be in the 50s or so. So the goal here is to fix gameplay, and I'm really excited to try this thing out. And then the other part of this is the conservative ball trait. Every single defensive player, save for like your Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu, superstar playmaker types on the defensive side, but you know, 99% of defensive players now have conservative ball trait. So the hope is that that combination, along now with my quarterback overhaul that we'll talk about when we get to quarterbacks, is just going to make this feel like a whole new game, almost like a new Madden 20, and it might even be better gameplay than Madden 20. We don't even know that. So really excited to actually get to fully play this thing, because I've spent so much time overhauling. I haven't had enough time to play, but that's the big one. That's the kicker right there. And then we've got spin move has been also just nerfed like crazy. I would say, you know, it's a little hard to say, but I would say about -10 on average for the spin move. You'll still get some guys that can use it, but, you know, frankly, it's just overpowered. You don't see spin moves that often in real life. It shouldn't, frankly, even be very usable at all. But, you know, that's basically the only way to make a guy miss, is to use that spin move. So that has been nerfed like crazy. So let's just run through position by position real quick. So quarterbacks, this is the one I'll spend the most time on. And I had that video that I kind of showed the gameplay with this to just test this before I did it. But it always, I always wondered why every trait in the game, for most positions, it's going to be between like 60 and 99, right? Like block shedding, finesse moves, tackle. But why is it that quarterbacks was basically, bottomed out at like 82 throw power? So I want to know what it felt like if I gave Case Keenum, who's known for having a weaker arm, 72 throw power. And is he still playable? And he totally was. So I don't know why EA decided to make it so essentially everyone has a strong arm if you're a quarterback, but now you're actually going to feel the difference between Case Keenum and Josh Allen. And they're going to have different skill sets, but you're going to actually feel like you're using a unique player, if that makes sense. And then the other thing is that short accuracy is now much higher on average. Deep accuracy is much lower on average. And this is to reflect what you see in real life. Most of these quarterbacks, if you're an NFL quarterback, you can throw a slant and be accurate with it almost every time, unless you're like, Josh Allen is infamous for not being very good at that. But I always found it frustrating that by the way the game thinks, say you're not under pressure, you're throwing to a wide open receiver on a slant, and compare that to throwing a wide open receiver 40 yards downfield on a go route. If you have 75 short accuracy and 75 deep accuracy, the game's not going to discriminate. You're going to still complete that ball at about the same rate. So what we've done now is made it so short accuracy is going to average out closer to 90, but deep accuracy, if there's quarterbacks that struggle with the deep ball, you're going to be looking at, sub 60 deep ball accuracy, and it's still very playable. It's going to sound scary at first, but it's going to be much more accurate to real life. So if you're using a Case Keenum, he's going to have, very high awareness, very high short accuracy, and he's going to be dominant throwing those short balls. But if you want to throw it deep, it's going to be a real struggle, just like it is in real life with Case Keenum. Whereas with EA's roster, frankly, I keep saying frankly, but honestly, Case Keenum, Aaron Rodgers, is there that much of a difference when you play with these players? No, there really is not, and that is just honestly disgraceful that it feels that way. So my goal here is that we're getting more towards that. Running backs, not a whole lot. We talked about spin moves is nerfed, but running back, not a whole lot of changes other than just lowering their overalls to match my grand scheme of things here. Wide receivers, again, not a whole lot here. Strength was kind of all over the place with wide receivers. You'd have 5'11", 170-pound receivers that were stronger than some of the bigger ones. And then tight end, not a whole lot changing here. The big thing here, and another, you could say this for receivers as well, is stiff arm is way up. If you're a big receiver, a big tight end, you're going to get a lot of 6'5", 255-pound receiving tight ends that just don't have a stiff arm ability. Like, those are the players that should be able to put a stiff arm. So you're not going to find a whole lot of tight ends with under 75 stiff arm now. Offensive line, not a whole lot of change. Slight tweaks so that guards have lower finesse blocking and higher power blocking, and vice versa for tackles. I don't know how much that's actually going to change some things, but that's just so that, in reality, you shouldn't be able to take a guard and put him at tackle and expect the same results. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can really do about that. The game doesn't discriminate between interior blocking ability and exterior. I wish that was something different, and maybe a rating they could add next year or something. But that's just a slight effort towards that. And then, of course, strength, way higher for linemen. There's a lot of offensive linemen in the 70s for strength, which does not make any sense to me, especially when there's cornerbacks that have higher strength. And then on the defensive side of the ball, interior defensive linemen, really not a whole lot to say on a micro scale for that position. Edge rush is going to get the jump nerfing, so if you're a defensive end that could play outside linebacker, you will have very low jumping. One thing as well with edge rushers versus interior defensive linemen, that block shed rating is going to be lower because so many people love to take like a Olivier Vernon or Everson Griffin and just play him at D tackle because Madden doesn't discriminate by size. All they do is look at that block shed rating. Well, this is an effort to make it. So if you're going to play Everson Griffin inside, which, yeah, he might do that on a pass rush down, but, he's not going to have that like 90 block shed where he's going to also play like an elite nose tackle, you know? So that block shed rating is going to come down a little bit for edge players. So that includes 3-4 outside linebackers, 4-3 D ends. And then for middle linebackers, they get a lot of change. Obviously, you have that jumping overhaul, the conservative trait. The coverage on average is just going to be lower to account for how overpowered usering is. Agility is a little lower. Certainly for linebackers this time around, is same with speed. You know, like obviously, you know, Roquan Smith can run a 4.5, which would equate to about 90 speed. Well, I might take that down 1 or 2 just because of how ridiculously overpowered usering is. You know, it'd be great if I could give him 90 speed and he would play like he does in real life, but you know, you put him out there and he moves like Darrelle Revis in Madden. So we're trying to account for some of the flaws in the game with some of this stuff. At cornerback, not a ton to address. With nickel corners, you'll notice much lower press ratings. You know, you would see like 5'9" corners like your nickel Roby Coleman who would have like really high press rating, you know, like 80, 81. Well, these are nickel corners for a reason. And we all know that height just doesn't matter. So if you're going to give nickel Roby Coleman, I totally botched that, but if you're going to give him high press, what's stopping you from playing him outside and being an elite outside corner, which he's not in real life? Now, I get that he might be an above average presser at his size. He can maybe use footwork a little better to do it. But given the fact that height just does not matter for receivers or corners in Madden, and it's disgraceful that it doesn't, I wish they would take that hip hit animation out of the game, just remove it, because it would just improve a lot of these problems. But that's just an effort to focus on the fact that these nickel corners are nickel corners for a reason. They should not be playing outside. And then also catching, by the way, much lower for corners, safeties, linebackers. Spectacular catch way down. And then for safeties, pretty much everything we've said. You know, jumping down, conservative play ball trait, catching a little lower. Basically everything you would expect. So that is just a mind dump of what this roster is. I myself am very excited to actually get my hands on this thing and get to play with it. And I'm even more excited to hear your feedback and kind of how this improves the game. If there's problems in some of the things I've done, I'm more than willing to listen to feedback on that stuff. So please do hit that like button, like the roster and the draft classes as well on Madden. I appreciate all of you guys for listening. Peace out as always. We'll see you next time.